Greetings from Ann Arbor, Michigan, a great state and a great place of the great USA. Welcome to our podcast series, and I am promising you that this series is going to be very enlightening, very inspirational, a lot of fun, and something that will really, I think, help you as you walk your path to holiness. This series is going to have a lot of different things that you probably have questions about, but maybe had the opportunity to ask, especially about religious life. Like, what do they do all day? Who are they? Where do they come from? What's it like when a young woman enters religious life? So stay tuned as we will discuss where sisters come from today. Welcome back, and we really do appreciate the fact that you are just so interested in our beautiful faith and in our particular community and in what you can do to lead yourself and others with you along the road that God has for you to great holiness. This is a segment of the Truth Will Set You Free series from the Dominican Sisters of Mary, Mother of the Eucharist in Ann Arbor, Michigan. In this particular segment, we are going to focus in on the missions that our community has. Now, I'm not going to tell the history of our community on this particular segment because it is already going to be on another segment. However, what I do want to refer to are just a few key points. When someone believes the Holy Spirit is nudging him or her to begin another religious community, to begin another group of young men or women, for us, the young women, in a religious community, that takes a lot of courage, I would certainly say. And yet I would say, and certainly in my own regard, and I believe in the regard of the other three foundresses, we would all say, when God calls, we just go. And people will say, was that nerve-wracking? And I would have to say, no, I kept my eyes on the goal and I believed God wanted it, or I wouldn't have done it to begin with. So at the very beginning of our community, there were a lot of decisions. There's a lot of red tape, I can certainly say, that has to do with the individuals beginning this new community. And with Rome, and with many other aspects, there's a lot of red tape, rightly so, because this has to be authentically the work of the Holy Spirit, or we wouldn't want it and nobody else would either. And so the community began in 1997. We made our vows in this new community of the Dominican Sisters of Mary, Mother of the Eucharist on February 9th, 1997, in the private chapel of Cardinal John O'Connor in New York City. So his private chapel there at St. Patrick's Cathedral. It was a day that none of us will ever forget. And as we looked around at the four of us, we began to say, okay, we will really know that God is really blessing our efforts and our desires if indeed we begin getting vocations. And actually, we began getting vocations. Our very first one came from a girl who we got to know in those months in New York while we were founding the community, working on all the red tape that is necessary. And she followed us to Ann Arbor and entered as one of our very first vocations. And since then, we have received numerous vocations. And today, we continue to be very blessed by God with this. Now, what does this translate to if I'm referring to missions? When a young woman goes through the novitiate, and that too is being covered on another podcast in this series, when she goes through all that and she completes her vows and she's ready with her education degree, and many enter with that degree or with other degrees, some with masters, some with PhDs. It's across the board, whoever God calls to our community. But at that point, she will be sent by obedience on what we call a mission. A mission basically is a smaller convent and another part of, we used to say the USA, today we can say the world because we are international, but basically another place whereby she will be given an assignment for that year to live in this particular community and to teach. Now, that's exciting. Because what does that mean? As we receive more vocations through the divine heart of Christ, as He brings us more young women, they make it through the novitiate and all their initial preparation that is necessary, which we've mentioned. Then she's sent out. We are able, because God is so generous with vocations to our community, to each year send them into new schools, not necessarily newly built or newly constructed, but schools that are new to our community. Now, I know what you're already thinking. You're already saying, how do we get you here, wherever here may be, according to who you may be? Because we hear this story so many times. And literally, our hearts just bleed wanting to be there wherever you may be. At the present moment, we have well over 400 invitations. Can you come to this school? Can you come to that school? Generally speaking, we send out at least 4 sisters because for our monastic prayer life and is able to be lived well when we have about 4 sisters at least. Sometimes we can send 5, sometimes 6, sometimes 7, depending on the needs of the school, depending on the size of the school, depending on many variables. But when we send them out, they live that very same daily schedule as the one that you've already heard on a previous podcast of The Truth Shall Set You Free. And I also want to say that's the beauty of entering a life that you can say, no matter where I may be sent for any years of my life, I know what I'll be doing because our monastic schedule stays the same. Unless it has to be for various reasons, which obviously do come up, modified. But we can always be assured of our Eucharistic adoration. We can always be assured of daily Mass. We can always be assured of the divine office. We can always be assured of the community rosary. We can be assured of community recreation times and the fact that in whatever manner we're asked, we will be teaching and preaching. And as we mentioned earlier, many times that also comes through prayer for places we've been asked to come and we cannot possibly send because we don't have enough sisters. As has been said before, if we had thousands, we would be able to use them up immediately because there's that dearth of vocations, and yet God in His goodness is bringing them back, many more young women to this life. So now, at a certain point, we were able to spread out, to send our well-educated sisters out to begin to teach and preach. And in preparation for this podcast, I was looking up the number of schools that we have at the present. This will grow every single year, but I can tell you that we are in over 15 dioceses and over 25 different schools. And when I say over, it could change tomorrow and certainly by the time that you see this. But we are 21 years old as a community, and our community has grown every single year. And the formation really is the first 8 years of a sister's life. So if you consider that, how many years have we been able to send sisters out? And yet, let me read to you a list of some of the places that we are in. I won't say whether it's a grade school or it's a high school or it's college, because presently in different places, we do teach from pre-K all the way through college and even in a seminary. So we are spread across the board with various degrees, various interests, various personalities, but that common desire to bring veritas, to bring truth to all of our students and to inspire them and their families to holiness. We will speak more about that in a minute. Let me read you this list. We are now in these areas: Phoenix, Arizona, Buda, Texas, Sacramento, California, Austin, Texas, San Francisco, California, Worthington, which is right there at Columbus, Ohio, Washington, D.C., Georgetown, Texas, Chicago, Peoria, Illinois, Lansing, Michigan, Detroit and St. Clair Shores, Michigan, obviously here in Ann Arbor, in Kansas City, Missouri, in Houston, and we're also in St. Paul, Minnesota. And beyond all those, and again, that's a variety of schools, and some one convent will send 2 sisters to the elementary school and 2 sisters to the high school. Some will send two, and one to the college. So it's a real variety that fluctuates according to the needs of the church and the ability that we as a community have to fill those needs. We also are now in Rome. We have 4 sisters in Rome every single school year, and then they also work beyond into the summer. 2 of the sisters are librarians at the Pontifical North American College, which means basically they are librarians for the NAC, or the North American College, and also for the Casa Maria, which is the housing for the young priest from the States that go over and study there. And it's not just from the States, that too is very international. So our sisters work as librarians there, while at least 2 others study for their advanced degrees at the Angelicum, or the Dominican University there, which is the University of St. Thomas Aquinas, a great Dominican theologian, father of the church, doctor of the church, etc. So our sisters are spread all over. And you might say, well, how do you make this determination? Because that's many times asked. Why did you decide to go there and not here? I can't answer that. For some answers, we have to rely on the Holy Spirit. We have to trust in faith. We only know that for some particular reason, there is something about this particular setup. First of all, there's a lot of things that do have to be put in place for us to be able to go there. Like what? We can never go where the bishop doesn't first invite us, because this is part of the church. That diocese is his jurisdiction. The schools within that diocese certainly are his jurisdiction. And whoever he invites in to officially teach and preach, and we as Dominican sisters certainly do that, must have his permission. And we wouldn't go without his invitation. We don't wait for him for us to invite him. Can we come? We ask, he asks if we are able to come. And many, many times we fulfill as many as we're able to. But again, there will always be many that no matter how many sisters we had, we cannot get to them all. But the beautiful thing in that is the lesson that you people, you good people today, want sisters back in Catholic schools. Again, I gave you my vocation story on another podcast. If it wasn't for my Catholic education, would I be a sister today? You know, only God would know, because a lot of young women entering today have never even met a sister. Maybe I'm the first one and the only one sometimes that they will meet before they actually enter. Talk about walking in faith. But for me, I grew up with the sisters. I had a beautiful family. They sent me out to school. The sisters took me in. And from 1st through 8th grade, and then a different community from 9 to 12. And then I entered the community of the Dominicans. But those sisters became like family to me. I saw the reverence, or the love that my parents certainly had for the sisters. And so it just became, this is good. This is an option. It's my vocation to get married like my beloved parents are and have a beautiful marriage like they have and bring children into the world. Or is my vocation to become a religious sister like these beautiful sisters are, who too are a part of my family? So I always say God spoiled me. Maybe he had to. Maybe I would have been too slow to have figured it out any other way. But I grew up staring at sister and saying to myself, I will be like that someday. I knew that early on. And I can remember when my father would have job offers to move elsewhere for much better paychecks, etc., the determination would always come down, and he and my mother would discuss it. And I can remember listening in on some of it. We will not take our children out of St. Mary's School. This is a good school. The sisters love them. They will be taught by the sisters. And so there's a lot of people that my community, my various sisters teaching all over the United States and beyond, that we really do know and we love. And we can tell you so many stories of people who have been very sacrificial to say they've moved their families so that their children could go to a Catholic school and be taught by sisters. Or they too, like my parents, have said no to job opportunities that were very appealing from the worldly standpoint, but from the spiritual, would it be worth the payoff of these children being educated by sisters and what they would know of their faith? I could laugh when I think now of coming home from school and at the dinner table. Yes, we, believe it or not, ate dinner together, and that was a command performance, so to speak, except for very special permission, which we had for various things that we did, obviously, outside of school. But I remember the question would always come up between both my parents, and they would say, "What did you learn today?" And they would say, "In religion class." And I would kind of smile to myself and say, "Well, gosh, we learned something interesting in history." And they'd say, "Okay, well, tell us about that." And then they would bring it back. "But what did you learn in religion class?" It wasn't until I became an adult and really reflected back that I thought my parents were trying to learn the faith also through their children who had the opportunities neither of them did. Mom, growing up as a Southern Baptist, certainly did not have the opportunities, and my father, from an immigrant family from Poland, did not have the money for his siblings and himself to go to Catholic schools. So, in large measure, the sisters taught my parents also through us. And I think that's what we try to do today. I remember when we first came to Ann Arbor, Michigan, one of the first questions that came like a week into the school year of one of our schools, our Spiritus Sanctus academies that we have, the parents came and had a complaint, and we were like, "Goodness, school's hardly started. What could be going on?" And the complaint was simply this: our kids already know more about their faith than we do. Teach us. How can you teach us too? So the sisters, in response to that beautiful question, accepted that challenge, and they began having some religion classes for parents either right after school started. The principals would also give another 45 minutes perhaps of educational religious instruction to parents, maybe 1 or 2 days a week. And these little groups began to grow. And then we began to offer the moms a mom's retreat as well, which also will be handled in another podcast. But I'm just saying the whole family catches on fire with the desire to know the faith. So when these children are taught all over the United States and they come home to mom and dad, they bring with them the freshness that every beautiful young child has. They bring with them the honesty that children can profess so clearly because they don't play any political games. They simply say it as they see it, and they repeat because their memories are incredible, and they repeat what they have learned. And then they actually say, "Mom and Dad, what about this?" And again, the stories are endless of the children who bring mom and dad sometimes back to Sunday Mass, back to confession, back to a deeper awareness of their own religious life, back to a deeper awareness perhaps of Eucharistic adoration. Suddenly the parents have caught that fire of love. They've realized that the truth will set you free, and they want more of the truth because, yes, it does belong to them. But for many possible reasons, they never received it. And so I often think of my parents, how can I give this in such a way? So our sisters are very clever. Sometimes they will come up with ideas and say, "Go home and talk to your mom about this and see what she thinks." Well, it brings up religion. It brings up philosophy, theology, in whatever grade level they might be. This could extend to any grade level. Ask other friends what they think about this. Many times in my morality classes, I will pose a very popular moral problem today, and we've got plenty of them. And then I will pose it as the person who doesn't seem to get what the church teaches or what the truth is. And then I will say to the student who's being graded on, "You defend the truth as you teach it to me." It puts them able to go out into a world that has tons of questions. And wherever there's a question, there's a defensiveness usually, because ultimately there's a deep vulnerability that nobody is comfortable with. So if someone really knows truth, the next person who doesn't is either going to say, "I'm jealous of that person, and I'm going to try to knock that down," in which case our students need to be ready to speak the truth and to speak it with joy and enthusiasm and devotion. So it's real. Or that other person is going to say, by the grace of God, "Can you teach me? I've never heard this." Many young people, even in college, will say, "Why didn't anybody tell me this?" Our sisters come back with so many stories of young people hearing some aspects of the truth for the very first time. And these aspects are essential to their life. And yet nobody at their age has ever told them, and they've never stumbled across it or even had a clue that there was a deeper reasoning and that there was a truth behind this. And so they will many times just thank the sisters for teaching them what no one else did. And again, there are so many things that go on like this. So as our sisters teach, we teach not only, certainly, academics and not only theology, but we always say we educate the whole person. We educate them if they are walking the halls in the school, how they respect the person that they're passing by, how they greet the teacher, how they go out of their way in kindnesses in the cafeteria, how they really take in these other people. We teach a very strong virtue program, education and virtue, that you will hear later. This has become our disciplinary system because they have to say which virtue they lacked, so that they're examining their conscience and they're growing in that extremely important self-knowledge. I know my weaknesses and I know my strengths, and both of them are me, and I love them all, but I will grow out of my weaknesses and I will use my strengths for goodness. We educate them in regards to athletics. The body is essential. We mentioned this when we were referring to Dominican spirituality and the incarnational aspect of the Dominican order. The body is essential. God gave this. He wanted this. This is His creation. The way we treat it, the way we deal with it is essential, and we will answer to God for the respect we pay towards our own bodies. And then, if that be true, which it is, we will answer to God for the respect we pay towards other bodies and people who don't see things the way we do, or people who don't value things the same and yet must be treated with dignity while also be giving the truth. But I've often found that when we are convinced of the truth, other people begin to gather around. It's sad to say a bit of a rare commodity that people know truth and that people are on fire with a passion for truth, for God. And when we meet these kind of people, we kind of want to hang out with them. We realize, each of us does, we've missed a few things that really are probably important in life. And we begin to, as the ancient Greeks did, as the Hebrews did, as Jesus himself was a teacher among other teachers, and yet his disciples and his apostles saw in him something different that they didn't have and they wanted. And the passion that he brought to it made them say, I will leave all things and follow you. You are the way. You are the truth. You are my life. And they would leave all things and follow him. And so as we look at the Dominican order spread all over in the various charisms, dealing mainly with teaching truth in every aspect, if it is in the speaking to a group on a retreat, if it is speaking to a group of young people in the middle of the basketball game as they come over to the sidelines and we're coaching, or wherever we may be, if it is speaking to you in this beautiful outreach of our community right into your homes and your hearts, we desire holiness for you, and we really do want you to know the truth. So as we look at this and we think of our sisters scattered all over, at any moment of a normal day, it makes me happy to just sometimes go through my various sisters, consider where they are, and imagine the students that they're teaching, the parents that they're reaching, the young people that their outreach is touching. And then again, always thinking, when we get home to heaven, it's going to be so neat to see how all these little interconnecting webs, so to speak, came together to make up this portion of that great mystical body of Christ, which will be, at that point, called the communion of saints. So let us go out and take the truth that we have been given and challenge ourselves to learn more, to actually put forth our desires to study, to discipline ourselves, to get good books, to share good books, to begin reading communities, to actually say, can we get together and discuss things like this, and to really delve into these things. I want to thank you for being here and all the challenges that I have left you with. Pray over and decide what you really are able to do with some of this. And may God bless you, and stay tuned for the next great episode of The Truth Will Set You Free. So if you like the material on this particular podcast, then please click on the next podcast for another fascinating story.